A millionaire discovered a newborn clutching a picture of his wife in the trash. The businessman was stunned to see what his wife had planned when he brought the baby home. Chicago became a shimmering, gloomy maze as the rain pounded the city's streets. Oliver, a tall, well-built man of 45, moved swiftly beneath his black umbrella. Normally full of confidence, his brown eyes now showed the weariness of a protracted business trip. He was reminded of the coziness of his mansion, nearby by the weight of the wet Italian suit. A sudden sound broke through the steady din of the rain as he was crossing a small street. "What is that?" "It sounds. No, it's not possible. Am I hearing things because I'm so exhausted?" Oliver scowled and strained his ears as he whispered to himself. The sound of water hitting the sidewalk nearly drowned out the baby's sporadic, feeble cries in the wet night. Oliver paused, surveying the area with a puzzled and worried expression. A feeling of urgency overcame him, and his heart began to accelerate. His cautious steps splattered water in the puddles that formed on the uneven ground as he approached the sound. Dear heavens, is that really a baby? Who would be capable of doing something like this? I can't ignore it. He let the sentence die on his lips, incredulity evident in his voice. As he approached a dark alley, the crying became clearer. Oliver hesitated for a moment, his mind racing through all the possibilities. Could it be a trap, a cruel trick by some opportunistic criminal? But the urgency of the baby's cries outweighed his doubts. He entered the alley, his eyes adjusting to the nearly impenetrable darkness. "I'm coming, little one. I'm here to help. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you," Oliver spoke softly, hoping to calm both the baby and himself. There, partially sheltered by a wet cardboard box, was a small bundle. Oliver knelt, ignoring the dirty water soaking his expensive pants. With trembling hands, he pulled back the damp blanket, revealing the red, tear-streaked face of a newborn baby. Oliver's heart tightened at the sight of such a tiny, defenseless creature abandoned on the cruel city streets. "How could someone do this to you, little angel? Don't worry. I'll take care of you now. I promise I won't leave you alone, and we'll look for help to find some family of yours," Oliver whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Carefully, Oliver took the baby in his arms, wrapping it in his own coat to shield it from the relentless rain. That's when something gleamed around the child's neck, catching his attention. With his heart pounding, he moved the wet fabric aside to reveal a delicate gold necklace. His fingers trembled as he touched the pendant, turning it to catch the faint light from the alley. "No, it can't be. Isley, how is this possible? Why does this baby have a picture of my wife on its necklace?" Oliver gasped, his mind reeling with the implications of what he was seeing. The face of his wife, Isley, smiled back at him from the tiny photo inside the pendant. It was the same necklace he had given her on their first wedding anniversary 5 years ago. Questions flooded his mind. How does this baby have the necklace with Isley's picture? Could it be possible he is our child? No, she would have told me, right? Who are you, little one, and how are you connected to my Isley? What secret did she keep from me? Oliver murmured, his voice trembling with emotion and confusion. The rain continued to fall mercilessly, but Oliver barely noticed. His world had shrunk to this moment, to this mysterious baby in his arms. He knew he should call the authorities, do what was legally correct, but something inside him, an instinct he couldn't explain, compelled him to protect this child at all costs. "I can't leave you here. I can't hand you over to strangers. I need to uncover the truth. Isley will have to explain everything to me," Oliver decided, his voice firm despite the storm of emotions. With renewed determination, Oliver stood up, adjusting the baby in his arms to shield it better from the rain. He looked both ways down the alley, ensuring no one was watching. The weight of the decision he was about to make pressed on his shoulders as much as the soaked suit. "Let's go home, little one. Together, we'll figure out what's going on. I don't know what awaits us, but we'll face it together." Oliver spoke softly to the baby, who was now calming in his arms at the sound of his voice. Oliver left the alley, blending into the shadows of the rainy night. Each step brought him closer to his home and further from the life he knew. The baby in his arms was now more than just an abandoned child. It was an enigma and possibly the catalyst for a change that would alter the course of his life forever. "Isley, what are you hiding from me? Why didn't you ever tell me about this child? How could you deceive me like this?" Oliver whispered to the night, his voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. As he approached his mansion, Oliver felt the weight of his decision. He knew that by crossing the threshold with this baby, he was embarking on a journey from which there would be no return. Unanswered questions swirled in his mind. How will Isley explain the photo? What does this baby mean for my marriage? And more importantly, who is this innocent child that fate has placed in my arms? No matter what happens, I promise to protect you and discover the truth. You are no longer alone in this world. Oliver solemnly vowed to the sleeping baby. With one last look at the dark, rainy street behind him, Oliver took a deep breath and opened the gate to his property. The path to his house had never felt so long, each step echoing with the weight of his decision. He knew that upon entering that door, his life would change forever, but something in his heart told him that this was the right thing to do, no matter the consequences. May God help us, little one. Our journey is only beginning. Whatever awaits us, we'll face it together, Oliver murmured, his voice mingling with the sound of the rain as he prepared to face the unknown. As he climbed the steps to his mansion, Oliver felt the baby shift in his arms, as if sensing the tension of the moment. He looked at the small face, now peaceful in sleep, and felt a wave of protectiveness he had never experienced before. Whoever this child was, he already felt a deep connection to them. I don't know who you are, little one, but you're already shaking the very foundations of my life. We may also change Isley's life, for better or worse, depending on what the truth reveals to us, Oliver whispered, his voice filled with emotion. With one final deep breath, Oliver turned the doorknob and opened the door, ready to face whatever fate had in store for him and this mysterious baby that chance had placed in his path. Inside his mansion, holding the peacefully sleeping baby in his arms, oblivious to the drama about to unfold, the silence of the house was oppressive, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock in the entrance hall. Oliver hesitated for a moment, his hands trembling slightly as he held the small bundle. Isley, are you home? If you are, come here immediately. We need to have a serious and urgent conversation, he called, his commanding voice echoing off the marble walls. The sound of hurried footsteps upstairs made Oliver hold his breath. He heard Isley's voice before he saw her. Oliver, my love, what a wonderful surprise. I didn't expect you so soon after that long business trip abroad, Isley exclaimed, descending the stairs. But her words died on her lips as she saw her husband's serious expression and the suspicious bundle in his arms. Oliver watched his wife closely, searching her face for any sign of recognition or guilt. Isley, a 40-year-old woman with a classic beauty rivaling movie stars, looked genuinely confused. Her green eyes, usually warm, were now wide with surprise and concern. "Oliver, what is happening? What is that in your arms, and why are you so wet?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. With a deliberate movement, Oliver uncovered the face of the sleeping baby. The silence that followed was deafening. Aisley stood motionless, her expression shifting quickly from confusion to shock, and then to something Oliver couldn't decipher. "Aisley, I need you to explain this to me. I found this baby abandoned on the street, and he was wearing a necklace with your picture on it. What are you hiding, Aisley? I need an explanation. How did this end up with an abandoned baby?" Oliver said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. Careful not to wake the child, Oliver revealed the necklace with Aisley's photo. His wife's audible gasp filled the air, her eyes fixed on the small golden pendant. I don't understand. How is this possible? Is this some joke you're playing on me, Oliver?" Aisley stammered, taking a step back. Oliver stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Aisley's face. He could see the panic growing in her eyes, the color draining from her cheeks. "That's what I want to know, Aisley. How is it possible this baby has your necklace, the one I gave you on our first wedding anniversary? Do you have something to tell me?" Oliver pressed, his voice rising slightly. Aisley staggered, gripping the banister for support. Her hands were visibly trembling now, and Oliver could see she was struggling to breathe. "Oliver, I can explain. It's not what you think," she began, but her voice faltered. The baby chose that moment to wake up, its soft cry breaking the tension in the air. Oliver looked down, trying to soothe the child, and when he looked up again, he saw Aisley moving closer, as if mesmerized. "Let me see him up close, please, Oliver. Before I tell you what's going on, I need to be sure of something," Aisley whispered, extending her trembling hands. Reluctantly, Oliver allowed Aisley to come closer. She looked at the baby, her eyes filling with tears. Her hand gently touched the child's cheek, and a sob escaped her lips. "Oh my God, this can't be. Oliver, I can't believe this is happening to us," Aisley murmured, her voice barely audible. Oliver watched the scene with a mix of confusion and apprehension. Aisley's behavior wasn't that of a woman caught by surprise. Rather, it seemed like that of a mother finding something she had lost, searching for a hidden truth. It was something different. "Aisley, please stop stalling and tell me the whole truth. Who is this baby? What is going on?" Oliver pleaded, his voice now softer. Aisley lifted her gaze to meet Oliver's, and what he saw there scared him. There was pain, fear, and something that looked like guilt. "Oliver, I never wanted you to find out like this. There is really something very important I need to tell you," she began, but before she could finish her sentence, her eyes rolled back, and she stumbled backward. Oliver, still holding the baby, tried to reach her, but it was too late. Aisley collapsed onto the marble floor with a dull thud, unconscious. Aisley, wake up. Please, wake up. What is happening to you?" Oliver shouted, falling to his knees beside her, still holding the baby in one arm. The baby began to cry louder, frightened by Oliver's sudden movement and shout. Oliver's mind whirled, torn between concern for his unconscious wife and the need to calm the child in his arms. "It's okay, little one. Everything's going to be fine. Aisley, please don't do this to me. Wake up," Oliver murmured to the baby automatically as his free hand checked Aisley's pulse. With his heart pounding, Oliver realized he was living his worst nightmare. His wife lay unconscious on the floor, possibly needing urgent medical care, and he was alone with a mysterious baby, somehow connected to her. What do I do now? How can I help them both at the same time? Oliver spoke out loud, panic rising in his chest. In that moment, looking at Ainsley's pale face and feeling the weight of the baby in his arms, Oliver knew his life had changed irrevocably. The secrets his wife was hiding, the mystery of this abandoned baby, all of it was now part of his reality. Still holding the baby, Oliver knelt beside Ainsley. Panic overwhelmed him as he saw his wife lying unconscious on the cold marble floor. "Ainsley, help! Someone help me!" Oliver shouted, his voice echoing through the mansion, trying to call the staff. As he raised his voice even further, the sound of hurried footsteps soon filled the house. Odessa, the middle-aged housekeeper, and Michael, the butler, appeared, running into the entrance hall, their faces pale with concern. Oliver, his voice trembling but firm, ordered Michael, "Call an ambulance and Dr. Arnold immediately. Tell them it's an emergency." While Michael rushed to make the calls, Odessa knelt beside Ainsley, checking her vital signs. Her eyes widened as she noticed the baby in Oliver's arms, but she wisely chose not to ask questions at that moment. "Mrs. Ainsley is breathing, sir, but her pulse is weak. We need to act quickly to help her," Odessa informed. Oliver nodded, grateful for the efficiency of his staff, and carefully handed the baby to Odessa. Turning back to his wife, holding her hand and caressing her face, Oliver whispered, "Help is on the way," his voice choked with emotion. The distant sound of sirens announced the imminent arrival of the ambulance, marking the beginning of a journey that Oliver knew would change their lives forever. As they waited, Oliver couldn't stop thinking about the whirlwind of events that had led to this moment. The mysterious baby, Ainsley's necklace, her sudden fainting spell. It all formed a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Whatever the truth behind all this is, I'm ready to face it," Oliver thought, looking from Ainsley's pale face to the baby he held in his arms. Minutes later, Oliver was seated in the hospital waiting room, his hands trembling as he held the baby in his arms. The ambulance had arrived quickly, and the paramedics had rushed Ainsley inside while he was still trying to comprehend what was happening. The doctors had asked him a few quick questions, but Oliver could barely concentrate, his thoughts circling around Ainsley and the necklace around the baby's neck. How could this baby be connected to Ainsley? I need to find out soon. Time is running out, and I need answers as quickly as possible, he wondered, unable to shake the image of the pendant from his mind. The emergency room door opened, and a doctor stepped out with a tense expression. He walked over to Oliver, who was holding the baby in his arms. Instantly, Oliver rose in one swift movement, his anxiety evident. "Mr. Fuentes, your wife is stable for now, but there is something important we need to discuss immediately." Oliver's heart skipped a beat at the doctor's words. What happened to her? Why did she faint like that? Will she be all right? The worry in his voice was unmistakable. The doctor motioned for him to calm down and continued, "We detected a serious condition in the preliminary examination. Your wife has been diagnosed with leukemia. We need to act quickly to start treatment. Otherwise, she won't survive for more than a few days." Oliver felt the ground fall out from under him. Leukemia. This didn't make sense. Ainsley had always been a strong and healthy woman. How could this happen so suddenly? How could she only have a few days to live? He rubbed his face with his hands, trying to process the news. How is this possible? She never mentioned being ill. What can we do now? His voice was low, almost a whisper, as he looked at the doctor, hoping for answers. The doctor, with a grave look, said, "The only chance for a complete cure is a bone marrow transplant. We need to find a compatible donor as soon as possible." Oliver swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation. A transplant? But where would we find a donor? He knew that time was essential in cases like this. And what can we do about that? Is there anyone we can test? He asked, anxious, his gaze fixed on the doctor who had brought the bad news. The doctor hesitated for a moment before continuing, "Bone marrow from close relatives is usually the most compatible." The words hit Oliver like a bomb. He looked down the hallway leading to the nursery, feeling the weight of his doubt. This is too much to take in. But what if this baby is a child easily kept from me? What if this baby could save her? He thought, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. Oliver knew he needed answers before making any rash decisions. This baby might have some level of compatibility with my wife. Could we test him? He asked the doctor. The doctor brought him back to reality. Yes, but we need to act fast. The decision is yours. If the baby is compatible, it could be a chance to save your wife. Oliver nodded slowly, still dazed. I understand, doctor, but I need some time to process all of this. I'm not going to make this decision immediately. The doctor looked at him with understanding, but also with urgency. Your wife's health depends on a quick donor match. Time is a crucial factor for us to save her. Oliver knew that. He knew that every minute was precious. But he couldn't act impulsively. I need to find out the truth about this baby before anything else. I can't just use this child without knowing where they came from. I'll find out who this baby is first. Then we'll see how they fit into this story, he thought, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing his shoulders. He stood up with determination, heading toward the nursery. Walking toward the nursery, Oliver felt his heart tighten with every step. Why do I feel like this baby has something to do with Isley? How can this necklace be around the neck of an abandoned child? He paused, cradling the baby in his arms. A nurse approached, noticing Oliver's uneasy presence. The doctor informed us that you would decide whether to test the child's compatibility with the patient. Will this be the child to perform the transplant for your wife? She asked, making Oliver feel overwhelmed by the pressure. No, not right now. I want to take him with me for now. I want to do a DNA test first in a private lab. I need to know who this child is before deciding anything. I need a blood sample from my wife to see if this child could be her child, he said, his voice choked with emotion. The nurse looked confused, but Oliver was too nervous to notice. The nurse hesitated, surprised by the change in plans, but nodded, understanding the delicate situation. Of course, sir. I'll need you to sign some papers before you leave so I can provide the sample. Oliver agreed, feeling a mix of anxiety and urgency. He knew he couldn't waste time, but he also couldn't make such a critical decision without knowing more about this child. While the nurse organized the documents and prepared the sample, Oliver stood there observing the baby with a mix of bewilderment and uncertainty. I need to understand what's going on. This necklace, it can't be a coincidence. Isley, what are you hiding from me? How does all of this connect? He shook his head, feeling himself sink further into unanswered questions. With the document signed and the vial in hand, the nurse looked at Oliver a bit concerned and offered help with transporting the baby. No, I'll handle it myself. I'm heading to the lab immediately. This is on me now. I need answers, and I need them fast. He left the hospital with the baby wrapped in his coat, feeling the weight of responsibility increase with every step. As he walked to the car, the rain began to fall again, as if the universe reflected the chaos in his life. Oliver carefully placed the baby in the back seat and started the car, heading toward his next destination, a private laboratory where he could perform the DNA test without interference. I need to know the truth. I need to understand what's going on before anything else, both to save my wife's life and to set our lives on a new path. During the drive, Oliver's mind couldn't stop racing. If this baby is indeed connected to Isley, everything changes. But how did he end up on the streets? Why didn't anyone tell me anything? Did she know? He wondered, gripping the steering wheel with sweaty hands, his heart pounding. He tried to stay calm, but the questions haunted him with every mile he traveled. Finally, upon reaching the laboratory, Oliver parked and entered hurriedly with the baby. The attendant looked at him curiously, but didn't ask any questions. Oliver, direct and without hesitation, requested a DNA test. The attendant gestured for him to follow, and Oliver briefly explained the situation. The baby remained calm, as if unaware of the significance of the moment. This will give me the answers I need. I have to know the truth before doing anything. Oliver quickly filled out the paperwork, and the lab proceeded with collecting samples for the test. Oliver asked how long it would take to get the results, his voice full of urgency. It may take a few days, sir, but we will do our best to expedite and deliver the results in a shorter time frame, said the man. Oliver nodded quickly, thanking him. I don't have days. My wife's life is hanging by a thread, and every second counts. Please put in a rush request to get this test done in just a few hours. I won't spare any resources. I'll do whatever is required from you. While waiting for the lab procedures, Oliver felt the crushing weight of the decision still ahead. The future of his wife, his own life. Everything seemed suspended in the balance. Everything depends on this test. If the baby is compatible, I'll have to confront Isley and find out why she never told me anything. If he's not, then I'll have to find another way to save her. He was immersed in thought when his phone vibrated in his coat pocket. Without thinking, Oliver answered. The voice on the other end was low, almost a whisper, but direct. Mr. Fuentes, if you want to know the truth about the baby you found, come to the cafe across the street. I'll be waiting, and I'll tell you everything. The answer is closer than you think. Oliver's heart leaped, feeling as if he were being watched. Who are you? What do you know about the baby? How did you get this number? I want you to tell me right now who you are, or if you're working for someone. He tried to keep his voice steady, but curiosity and anxiety overflowed. The person on the other end left the phone silent, then hung up, not giving Oliver the answers he expected. Oliver was silent for a few seconds, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The call had a mysterious tone, and the promise of answers pulled him with irresistible force. He knew that even though he had requested urgency, he might find the truth faster by going to the cafe. He looked back at the lab, knowing the DNA test would bring part of the answers, but perhaps not all of them. Something told him the person on the phone might clarify what seemed like an impossible puzzle. Putting the phone back in his pocket, he left the lab with the baby in his arms, the weight of uncertainty still pressing on his shoulders. The rain fell harder now, but Oliver simply pulled the coat tighter around the child, shielding him from the heavy drops. Isley, you have to tell me the truth, but in the meantime, I'll find out another way. He walked toward the cafe across the street, his heart pounding, knowing that the truth was waiting for him. Oliver crossed the street with quick steps, the baby shielded under his coat, feeling the cold rain soak his shoulders. The cafe was just ahead, a small yellow light illuminating the sign that swayed gently with the wind. He looked around, his heart racing. The weight of responsibility bore down on him. But there was something more now, a growing anxiety for the truth. If this person knows what's going on, why not just say it outright? What did they want from me? Upon entering the cafe, Oliver was met with the soft sound of background music and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. There were few people in the place, and he quickly searched for someone who might be waiting for him. Each table had only 1 or 2 people, no one who stood out. He sat at a table near the window with a clear view of the street, always alert. The door behind him swung open as another customer entered, but Oliver remained focused on the baby now sleeping in his arms. His thoughts were on edge, a mix of restlessness and urgency. Whoever it is, I don't have time for games. I need answers now, because time is running out. The waitress approached, and Oliver ordered a coffee, still looking around. The atmosphere in the cafe felt oppressive at that moment. Every movement in the place heightened his senses. He felt vulnerable, exposed, as if he were being watched. Every second, he looked at the baby, still sleeping peacefully, and leaned forward, murmuring to himself, "No matter what happens, you're safe with me. No one will hurt you, I promise, little one." The coffee arrived, and Oliver took a sip, trying to stay calm. The hot liquid went down his throat, but it didn't ease the tension. He looked at his watch, impatience growing. Where is this person? Why make me wait so long? He had barely finished thinking this when his phone vibrated. It was a message. "I am watching you. Drink your coffee, and soon we'll meet. Rest assured." Oliver felt a shiver run down his spine. The idea of someone watching him at that moment, without him knowing who, made him even more anxious. He tried every moment to maintain a steady posture, but the unease increased. Oliver looked around, trying to identify any face that seemed out of place. People continued in their conversations, laughing and drinking calmly, as if nothing was happening, but he knew that someone there was playing with him. "Why don't you come to me? What are you hiding? What's the real purpose of all this? Whoever it is seems to want to test me, to make me uncomfortable," Oliver thought, taking another sip of coffee, his eyes still scanning every movement around him. He adjusted the baby in his arms, his sense of protection growing by the second, as if something were about to happen. Shortly after, he felt a slight dizziness, a sense of imbalance that began to intensify unexpectedly. Oliver felt his body weigh more than usual. He tried to stand, but his legs gave way, and he fell back into the chair, the baby still safely in his arms. Panic began to seep into his mind. "No, this can't be happening now. I must have been drugged. I can't die or faint now. I need to save my wife and the baby," he murmured, feeling sweat trickle down his forehead. He looked at the coffee in front of him, realizing that something was terribly wrong. The dizziness grew, and his vision started to blur. The world around him seemed to spin, as if he were trapped in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Oliver knew he had to protect the baby and couldn't let himself pass out. He held the baby tighter, trying to focus. Oliver's hands shook violently, and his mind was fighting to stay alert. He suspected that someone had slipped a substance into his drink and knew he needed help. The cafe door opened again, and Oliver, his vision hazy, tried to focus on who was coming in. Everything was spinning around him, and he couldn't make out faces. He tried to speak, but the words came out slurred. The baby, still safe in his arms, began to squirm, sensing all of Oliver's discomfort. "Please, everything's going to be okay. I'll protect you, and nothing bad will happen to you, little one," Oliver murmured with difficulty. struggling against the darkness that was about to envelop him completely. Time passed indistinctly for Oliver, who drifted between consciousness and darkness. When he finally started to come to, he was lying on the floor of the cafe, his head throbbing as if it had been struck by a hammer. The first thing he did was look for the baby. His vision was still blurred, but he quickly realized the baby was no longer in his arms. Panic took hold of him, and he tried to stand, but his muscles were weak, and his mind was still clouded. The cafe, once peaceful, was now deserted, with chairs overturned and the faint sound of footsteps receding into the distance. Oliver tried to think, but his mind was clouded by pain and fear. He dragged himself to the table, using it as support to stand. As his vision began to slowly adjust, the desperation grew within him with each second that the baby was missing from his arms. Someone took the baby. I was drugged, and now he's gone. I will find that baby, no matter the cost. Still dizzy, Oliver leaned on the table, trying to organize his confused thoughts. The cafe was empty, the dim lights flickering, giving the scene a surreal and haunting tone. Panic began to settle in as he wondered where the baby could be. Every second lost was a weight on his conscience. Someone did this to me, and now has the baby. Whoever it is, they can't have gone far. I need the baby back. I need answers, he thought, feeling a mixture of anger and desperation. His mind, even dazed, fought to find a solution. With difficulty, he stood up, his muscles aching with every movement. He left the cafe, still a bit unsteady, and headed straight for the street, where the rain had finally stopped, though the cold air still wrapped around him. The streets were deserted at this hour, except for a flickering light in a nearby alley. Oliver, with no other direction to go, decided to walk toward it, seeking any clue. As he moved forward, he felt frustration and fear rapidly growing within him. Upon entering the dark alley, he encountered a shadow moving in the dim light. For a moment, Oliver thought he was about to be mugged. A disheveled man with a scruffy beard and hungry eyes approached him with slow, uncertain steps. Oliver's heart raced, his body still too weak to react if he needed to defend himself. I can't believe this. Not now. I can't have trouble with muggers. Not when I can barely stand or walk steadily, he thought, his mind battling the dizziness. The beggar came closer, dressed in dirty and torn clothes, raising his hand in an uncertain gesture. Hey, boss, help me out, will you? Just need some spare change to eat. Haven't eaten for days. It's so cold, and no one's been helping me lately. Oliver, who had expected the worst, was surprised. It wasn't a robbery, just a plea for help. Despite the chaos around him and the fear consuming him, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a handful of crumpled bills he'd forgotten he had. Here, this should be enough. Go get yourself something to eat, and don't waste it on nonsense. No one should go hungry, he murmured, his voice still weak. Even in his condition, Oliver couldn't ignore the despair in the beggar's eyes. The man, upon receiving the money, looked at Oliver with curiosity. Thank you, sir, but tell me something. Why did your maid run out of the cafe with that baby? She seemed in a hurry, like she was fleeing from something. The man asked. Oliver froze at his words. What? What do you mean? You saw someone with the baby? I need you to give me all the possible details about this person. He leaned forward, urgency growing within him. The beggar nodded before beginning to recount. Yes, I saw her. A woman in a maid's uniform left with a child in her arms. It was quick, but she was heading east, toward the poorer side of town. That's all I remember. She was in quite a rush, muttered the beggar, pointing in the direction of the street. With those words, Oliver thanked the beggar and began walking quickly in the indicated direction. Each step was painful, but he couldn't afford to waste time. They're heading east. I need to get there before it's too late. I can't let anything happen to the baby. I must do everything I can to recover this child. He might be mine. No, don't think about that now, he murmured to himself, trying to ignore the pain and panic gripping his body. The dark night around him seemed gloomier than ever, but Oliver was determined to find the baby, whatever the cost. The beggar watched him from a distance, stuffing the bills into his pocket with a sigh of relief. He didn't understand exactly what was happening, but he knew something bigger was at play. Oliver, for his part, continued walking eastward, his heart beating irregularly. Anger and despair mixed into a single emotion. I won't let them take this child from me, no matter who is involved. I will find them. Night enveloped Chicago in a dense, unsettling darkness. Oliver walked quickly, his mind racing with worry. The east side of town was known to be a dangerous area where crime thrived, and he knew there wasn't a moment to lose. Each street he turned onto seemed emptier and more sinister than the last. The street lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the uneven sidewalks. She can't have gone far with the baby. I need to find them before something worse happens. Only God knows where this woman has taken the baby, and what terrible things could happen to him, he thought, quickening his pace despite the exhaustion weighing on his body. The poverty of the streets became more evident as he advanced. Run-down houses, peeling walls, and groups of people watching his passage with weary eyes. He knew this was not a place where he could feel safe, but that didn't matter now. Oliver walked, fighting against the growing despair. Every second, the image of the baby in danger pressed on him. More tension was on every corner, and Oliver felt strangers' eyes on him. The alleys were filled with garbage, and the stench of decay filled his nostrils. The distant lights flickered, but no one seemed willing to leave their shelters. With every moment I lose, the baby gets further away from me, and I lose my chance to save Isley. It doesn't matter if she lied or deceived me. She is still a human being, even if she may have betrayed my trust, he murmured to himself, trying to ignore the exhaustion and fear. Oliver knew the child's life depended on his speed and determination. Oliver stopped for a moment, trying to think of how to track someone in such a large, chaotic city. He looked around, realizing how vulnerable he was here, alone in unfamiliar territory. He reflected constantly, trying to understand the motive behind taking the baby and fleeing. The answer was close, but it always seemed to slip from his grasp. He rubbed his face, trying to shake off the sense of helplessness. She could be hiding anywhere, but why head to this part of town? He wondered as he moved forward. A group of men watched him from a corner, muttering to each other. Oliver quickened his pace, feeling the danger growing around him. His heart raced, his body still weak from the effects of the drug. But his mind focused on one goal, finding the baby. He knew that at any moment, he could be approached or go down a path with no return, but none of that mattered, as long as he hadn't recovered the child. I can't stop now. They're around here somewhere. I need to keep going, no matter how risky this may be. The streets became narrower, almost suffocating. The silence was interrupted only by the occasional sound of distant barking or hurried footsteps that disappeared soon after. He kept moving forward, even as his body begged for rest. Oliver felt sweat drip down his forehead, mixing with the dirt of the environment. Everything around seemed to work against him. I can't allow myself to falter now. I'm closer than ever. I must continue my journey, no matter the cost. As he turned another corner, Oliver spotted a worn-out building with a nearly faded sign swaying in the wind. The building looked abandoned, but something about it drew him in. It was an orphanage, he read with difficulty. The sign, though old, still indicated it was a place for children in need. His heart raced again. He couldn't ignore the feeling that this place was important. It was a hunch, but perhaps the only one he had. Maybe she brought the baby here. Could this be where they're hiding the baby I'm looking for? He asked himself, struggling to understand the motives of whoever had done this. Oliver approached the rusty gate slowly, examining every detail with caution. The building looked like it was in ruins, but something in the air alerted him that he wasn't alone. He looked around, making sure he wasn't being followed, and took a deep breath before entering. His heart pounded as he pushed open the gate, which creaked in protest, echoing down the silent street. I need to find out what's happening here. I won't leave without answers, or let myself be fooled as I was at the cafe. The surroundings of the orphanage were desolate. Tall grass crept into the courtyard, and the windows were shattered. Oliver wondered if anyone was even inside. He thought deeply as he walked cautiously. Each step made the floor creak, heightening his tension. He knew any noise could alert whoever was inside, but he had to check. If I find someone here, I need to be ready for anything, he murmured softly, feeling the weight of tension increase with each second. When he reached the main door, he hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. The door creaked and slowly revealed a dark, poorly lit corridor. Oliver stepped in, catching the smell of mold and dust. The place looked abandoned for years, but he knew that didn't mean it was empty. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart, and continued down the hallway. I can't give up now. If the baby is here, I'll find him and everything will be resolved. As he walked through the orphanage's interior, Oliver was increasingly consumed by a sense of discomfort. The peeling walls, the broken furniture, everything indicated that the place had been uninhabited for a long time. Yet somehow, he felt something was wrong. He kept asking himself, there must be an explanation. Something I still can't understand. Why do my instincts scream that she brought the baby to a place like this? The mystery seemed to deepen with every step he took. Suddenly, he heard a noise in the distance, as if something had been moved or knocked over. Oliver stopped, his body tensing immediately. His instincts told him to keep going, taking even more cautious steps, and staying alert for any further sounds. He knew he was walking into the unknown, but he had to continue. I will find him. The tension grew with every second, and Oliver moved through the hallways like a ghost, always vigilant, but with his heart racing. Reaching a larger room, he glimpsed what seemed to be a partially open door. His stomach churned at the possibility of finally finding what he was looking for. Trying to stay calm, Oliver approached carefully, hearing the sound of footsteps from inside. Without waiting any longer, Oliver pushed the door open and stepped in, his heart pounding. But what he found left him even more confused. The room was almost empty, except for an elderly woman cleaning the worn floor with an old mop. The frail woman with gray hair looked up with curiosity at Oliver's sudden entrance. He looked around, hoping to find something else, but there was only silence and the presence of the old woman. Oliver felt he was in the right place this time. Without wasting any time, he approached the woman. "Excuse me, have you seen a woman around here? Someone with a newborn baby? This child could be in danger." His voice was tense, but he tried to keep calm, hoping this woman could give him any clue, any information that would lead him back to the baby. The woman, her tired eyes filled with a certain wisdom, tilted her head thoughtfully. "A woman with a baby? This is an orphanage, sir. It's quite common for women with babies to show up here all the time," she murmured, as if recalling something. Oliver felt his heart race again. "Please, this is urgent. They might be hiding here. The baby is in danger. Try to remember anything. The woman must be different from those who come here every day. You must tell. Tell me if you saw anything. Anything at all." The woman continued mopping the floor for a moment, as if considering what to say. Oliver grew impatient, desperation building up. Finally, the woman stopped, leaning on the mop. Her eyes met Oliver's, and something in her expression changed. "I did see a woman acting very strange, but there's something you need to know first." Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that sent a chill down Oliver's spine. He stepped closer, his urgency growing by the second. The elderly woman glanced around, as if ensuring there was no one nearby. She moved closer to Oliver and spoke in a low tone. "I can't talk here. There's something very serious going on. If you really want to know what's happening with the baby and this woman, meet me at the back of the orphanage. I'll explain everything there." Oliver looked at her, confused. "Why can't you tell me now? What's happening here?" he asked. But the woman just shook her head. Oliver hesitated for a moment, trying to understand what the woman was implying, but his need for answers was stronger. He knew he couldn't miss this chance, even if something seemed out of the ordinary. "All right, I'll go. But please don't make me wait. I need to find the baby. It's a matter of life and death," he said, and the woman nodded slightly, pointing to a door at the back of the orphanage, indicating where the meeting would take place. Oliver left the room quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. His head was filled with questions as he tried to process everything that was happening. He walked through the dark, dimly lit corridors, each step echoing in his mind, increasing the tension. 10 minutes. That's all I have to wait. Does she really know something? Or is this just another game to distract me? When he reached the back of the orphanage, Oliver found himself in a poorly lit area filled with old boxes and accumulated debris. It was a place forgotten by time, where shadows seemed to move ominously. He looked around, waiting for the elderly woman. He felt vulnerable and alert, with tension growing by the second. She said she'd be here, but why all the secrecy? Could I be followed? What does fate have in store this time? Time passed, and Oliver began to feel increasingly uneasy. The darkness around him seemed heavier now, and the silence was suffocating. His mind was filled with questions, and he didn't know if he was about to uncover something important or if he was walking into a trap. Every sound seemed amplified, and the feeling that something was terribly wrong intensified. Suddenly, he noticed something on the ground near a pile of boxes. Oliver approached slowly, his stomach churning as he got closer. Then his heart stopped for a moment. The elderly worker was lying on the ground, completely still. Oliver knelt beside her, touching her wrist with trembling hands. There was no pulse. She was dead. Oliver was in shock, and panic seized him. He looked around, trying to make sense of what had happened. She knew something, and now she's dead. What does this mean? This can't be a coincidence. Whoever did this is closer than I thought. Someone killed her before she could speak. Oliver stood up slowly, his body flooded with adrenaline. The only thing he knew was that he was more deeply involved than he could have ever imagined. After a few seconds, still trying to process what had happened, he noticed something glinting faintly near the woman's hand. A cell phone, partly hidden within the folds of her worn coat. Oliver, still with trembling hands, picked up the phone. He knew it might hold the answers he needed. He unlocked the phone, which was still functional, and began searching for any clues, anything that might reveal what was happening. There was one last message sent. Oliver frowned as he opened the conversation. The recipient was an unknown number, and the message simply read, "Take him to the address in the suburbs. That's where they'll find the answers." Oliver felt the blood turn cold in his veins. The baby had been taken somewhere, and now he finally had a concrete lead. The suburbs. They're waiting for me there. I need to hurry and put an end to this endless ordeal. He knew he couldn't waste any more time. Whatever was happening was more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Adrenaline coursed through his body as he rose determined, holding the elderly woman's cell phone with the message still flashing on the screen. Oliver left the back of the orphanage, his heart pounding. He had a new destination, and the truth awaited him in the city's suburbs. With one last glance at the fallen woman, he murmured, "Now I know where to go. I won't let them hurt this child. I promise I'll find out what happened and save the baby. You didn't die in vain." And then he disappeared into the night, heading toward the next chapter in his desperate search after making an anonymous call to the police about the woman who hadn't survived. Oliver began to drive frantically along the winding road leading to the suburbs, feeling the weight of the darkness around him. The elderly woman's phone sat in his lap, the message on the screen still pulsing in his mind. The address was unfamiliar to him, but the sense that he was approaching something dangerous accompanied him with every mile. Oliver kept his gaze fixed on the empty road. This was the moment to confront the mystery that had haunted him since he found the baby. Somehow, he knew that the answers he sought were close. The car stopped in front of an old, semi-abandoned house covered in weeds and surrounded by an oppressive silence. Oliver felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the structure before him. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, observing the darkness enveloping the place. The house held something sinister, an invisible presence that seemed to watch him, waiting. This is it. This is where they are. The baby is in there. I'm absolutely certain that this time I'll get the child back and save my beloved wife. As soon as possible. My family depends on me. With cautious steps, he walked toward the door, feeling his heart race as he pushed open the front door. A long, high-pitched creak echoed through the empty house. Oliver entered, his eyes gradually adjusting to the interior darkness. The house was practically deserted, with old furniture draped in dusty sheets. The silence was absolute, interrupted only by the soft sound of his own footsteps. He looked around, trying to control his growing anxiety. Every corner of the house seemed to hide a secret, and the tension in the air only increased. Suddenly, a faint noise from one of the rooms caught his attention. Oliver felt his body tense. He walked toward the sound, his muscles taut and his senses alert. I'm not alone here, he thought, feeling his heart race. The door to the room was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open slowly, trying not to make a sound. Inside, dim light illuminated the silhouette of a woman holding a baby in her arms. Oliver stopped, the breath escaping his lungs. But what made him lose his breath wasn't just the sight of the baby. It was the woman's face. It was Ely. Oliver froze for a moment, unable to process what he was seeing. This can't be. It's not possible. Am I seeing things? Am I hallucinating? You, Ely? No. How can this be happening? He murmured, his mind spinning in a whirlwind of confusion. His voice trembled, and he took a step back, trying to distance himself from the impossibility before him. The woman, sensing his presence, turned slowly, each movement seeming deliberate, calculated. Her expression was calm, but carried something dark, a disturbing tranquility that Oliver couldn't interpret. The woman, with a soft yet deep voice that left him even more unsettled, said, "I knew you would come, Oliver. There was no other option, was there? You always seek the truth, even if you aren't ready to face it. And here you are, exactly where I knew you would end up. But tell me, were you prepared for what you'd find? To face what's been hidden from you for so long?" She paused, watching him, her gaze heavy. "It doesn't matter. Fate brought us here, and now there's no turning back. You want answers, I know, but are you ready to hear them? Are you ready to discover that your life, the life you thought you knew, was built on lies?" Oliver took a step forward, still confused by the resemblance. "Ailey, no, you're not her. Who are you? What is happening? How is this possible? Who are you?" he stammered, trying to piece things together. But the sight of the woman and the baby left him increasingly unsettled. She gave a slight, enigmatic smile. "I'm not Ailey, but you recognize me, don't you? We share the same face, the same blood." Oliver felt the ground shift beneath his feet. The woman looked down at the baby in her arms and sighed before answering. "My name is Da. I'm Ailey's twin sister, the sister she never told you about, the sister who was abandoned in childhood." Her words cut through the air like a sharp blade. Oliver felt a wave of shock course through his body. Twin sister? Abandoned? Ailey never said anything about you. Why would she hide something like this? He couldn't believe what he was hearing. How could Ailey never have mentioned her? He needed answers, but the situation was only getting more confusing. Ta gave a faint smile, but her eyes remained cold. "She forgot me, Oliver. She was raised in a life of privilege while I was left behind, rejected. No one ever cared about me, not even our parents. And now here you are, looking for this baby. But the question is, what do you really know about him?" There was a deep bitterness in her voice, something Oliver couldn't ignore. Da held the baby tightly, almost daring Oliver to come closer. Oliver tried to remain calm, but the tension was palpable. This baby. Why was he wearing Ailey's necklace? What's the truth behind this? Why did you take him? He needed to understand what was happening, but he felt as if Da was manipulating the situation. She smiled enigmatically, as if she were enjoying the game. "Everything has a purpose, Oliver. This baby is important, more than you imagine. He's the missing piece to settle once and for all the differences between Ailey and me." Oliver took a step closer, his voice more resolute. "If you're really Ailey's sister, why do this? Why involve the baby in this story? What do you want from me?" Da looked at him for a long moment, the smile fading. "I want what was always denied to me. I want what Ailey took from me without even knowing. And this baby. So he's the key to that. I want a chance to be a mother, to have something that was always taken from me. Even this. Ailey has it, and I don't." She looked at the baby, her eyes softening for a moment. Oliver tried to understand what she was saying, but the pieces of the puzzle still didn't fit. Why she would take the baby, and what her plan was, were questions that needed concrete answers. But Da seemed more interested in playing with his mind. "The plan was always simple, Oliver. I want justice. I want the world to know what Ailey did, even if she isn't aware of it. This child, this boy, your son, She doesn't deserve to have him, she said, lifting her gaze to him. Oliver felt a wave of shock wash over him. This baby is my son, he asked, feeling despair rise within him. You don't need to use this baby for that. You didn't need to take that woman's life. We can work this out another way. Just give me the baby, and we'll talk. It doesn't have to be like this. His voice was now calmer, almost pleading, as he tried to approach Duh, but she shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with restrained anger. No, Oliver, this baby is mine now. He's part of my story, my redemption. I'll do anything to keep him. He's my child now. You won't take this child from me. Oliver knew the situation was becoming more and more dangerous. He had no idea how far Duh was willing to go to get what she wanted. Please, Duh, you do not need to do this. There cannot be redemption at the cost of an innocent child. But she seemed unconvinced. You do not understand, Oliver. I have waited my entire life for this. I will not let anyone take away what I have finally achieved. Today is the day justice will be served. The price I paid for all this time will be repaid today. The tension in the air was becoming unbearable. Oliver knew that if he did not act quickly, something terrible could happen. I am taking my son out of here, Duh. You may have suffered, but you cannot take it out on a child. He is not part of your past. Duh took a step back, clutching the baby even tighter. She began retreating toward the back door. Oliver felt the urgency growing. He needed to act, but he knew that any hasty move could put the baby in danger. Duh, please listen to me. This does not have to end like this. We can resolve this another way. There is no reason to turn this situation into a tragedy. I know you have suffered, but hurting more people will not fix what happened in the past. Duh looked at him for a long moment, her gaze filled with hurt, but also with a cold determination. She held the baby tightly, as if he were the only thing that connected her to the world. Oliver, you still do not understand, do you? There is no other way. All my life, I have waited for a chance to take back what was taken from me, to fix the injustice I suffered. I never got a second chance, and now I am not going to allow it to be taken away from me again. It is too late to turn back. Duh, you do not have to do this. My son has done nothing wrong. He is not part of the past that hurt you. He is innocent, just as you once were. Do not do to him what was done to you, Oliver pleaded, his voice trembling with desperation as he took slow, careful steps toward her, trying to stay calm. He needed to stop Duh from doing something irreversible. Think about it. We can find a solution. I know Ailey would never have abandoned you. I do not know what happened in the past, but I can help. Revenge will not give you the peace you are looking for. To let out a bitter laugh, a laugh that echoed through the empty walls of the house. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of sadness and madness. You think you can help me? You think anyone can? After everything I went through, I lived in the shadows while Ailey had everything: love, family, safety. And what did I have? Nothing, Oliver. Nothing but being forgotten and the pain. And now you are telling me not to do what is necessary. Her eyes grew cold and merciless as she held a box of matches, her fingers twisting a small wooden matchstick between them. Oliver froze, his heart racing. What are you doing, Duh? For heaven's sake, you do not need to do this. Setting fire to this house will not change the past. It will only destroy more. He felt sweat trickling down his forehead as he looked at the matches in her hands, each second heightening the tension. Please think about what you are doing. The baby, you said yourself you want to be a mother. What kind of person would do this to an innocent child? Is this what you want? Da observed him, the silence between them charged with an energy that seemed ready to explode. I want justice, Oliver. I want everyone to feel what I felt. The pain of loss, of abandonment, of fire that consumes everything and leaves nothing but ashes. This baby, he is the symbol of everything I could never have. He will be the sacrifice for my suffering. And if Easley did not have the courage to tell you about me, now you will find out what she hid in the most painful way. Before Oliver could say anything else, Da, with a determined motion, struck the match, and the flickering flame danced before his eyes. Oliver took a few steps forward, but Da had already thrown the lit match into a corner of the room, where old papers and flammable objects were piled up. The flames began spreading quickly, licking the wooden walls and the floor with ferocity. Oliver took a step back, panic seizing him. He tried to approach her, but Da stepped back, keeping the distance between them. As the flames began to take over the room, he said, "You are insane. You are putting your own life and the baby's life at risk. Da, please, let me take my son out of here. He has nothing to do with what happened to you." He pleaded, but Da laughed a dark, desperate laugh, as if she was embracing the chaos she had unleashed. "You still do not understand, Oliver. I am not leaving here. There is no salvation for me." Desperate, Oliver looked at the spreading fire, knowing that every second lost meant more danger for the baby. He needed to act quickly. You do not have to destroy yourself like this. If you feel you were left behind, I can help you build something new. But this is not how suffering ends. Please, Da, think about the baby. He took another step forward, feeling the heat of the flames rising, but they remained relentless. You speak as if you could understand what it is like to live in ashes, but you do not. Her words echoed in Oliver's mind, and he realized that Da would not change her mind. With the flames already threatening to engulf the entire room, Oliver knew there was no more time for appeals. He lunged toward Da, trying to grab the baby from her arms, but she quickly moved back, dodging him. The flames climbed higher, and the heat became almost unbearable. "I will not give up, Da. I will not let you hurt him," he shouted, his voice muffled by the smoke that was beginning to fill the air. Oliver felt the heat intensify around him. The fire spread with devastating speed, devouring the walls and consuming everything it touched. The flames roared like hungry beasts, reaching every corner of the abandoned house. The thick smoke was already filling the air, making each breath a challenge. He knew he did not have much time. The baby was in danger, and Da seemed completely surrendered to the chaos she had created. He looked at Da, who remained still, clutching the baby with frightening firmness. Her gaze was fixed on the flames, as if hypnotized by the destruction around her. Oliver felt despair taking over. "Da, please, it does not have to be like this. Let me save the baby, and we can leave here. There is still time," he shouted, his voice hoarse from the heat and smoke, as he slowly approached her. Da raised her eyes, a sad, resigned smile on her face. "Oliver, do you really think there is salvation for me? Some people do not want to be saved. I am one of those people." Oliver felt his heart tighten, but he could not give up. "No, you may not want to save yourself, but the baby has done nothing wrong. He does not deserve to pay for this. Please, Da, let him go. I promise I will do whatever it takes to help you. It does not have to be like this." He held out his hand, his eyes fixed on the baby, who was so close and yet seemed unreachable. Da hesitated for a moment. Something in Oliver's gaze made her waver, as if a part of her wanted to believe there was still a way out. But the anger and pain she had carried for years were stronger. She looked at the baby, then back at Oliver with a look of deep regret. You will never understand. Aisley had the life that was denied to me. This baby represents everything I never had. I am not giving him up. Before Oliver could respond, a beam from the ceiling fell, crashing to the ground with a loud bang that reverberated through the house. The fire was now out of control, and the smoke was suffocating. Da, please. There is no more time. If we do not leave now, we are all going to die. Oliver tried to take another step toward her, but Da backed away, holding the baby even tighter. Oliver felt a wave of desperation, but also of adrenaline. He knew that if he did not act at that moment, it would be too late. Ignoring the heat that felt like it was burning his skin, he lunged toward Da. She tried to resist, holding the baby tightly, but Oliver managed to carefully grab the child and pull him from Da's arms. The baby's cries echoed through the room as the flames roared around them. Da, I have to get him out of here now, Oliver shouted as he wrapped the baby in his coat, protecting him from the heat and smoke. You can hate me, you can want to burn this house to the ground, but the baby will not die here. I will not allow it. He took a step toward the door, but when he looked back, he saw Da standing in the middle of the room, tears streaming down her face. Oliver hesitated for a moment, holding the baby securely in his arms. He knew he could just leave the house, save the child, and let Da stay behind, but he could not do that. He could not let Da destroy herself along with that house. Da, I am not leaving here without you. No matter what you think happened in the past, you do not deserve to die like this. I will not let you do this. Da shook her head, still overwhelmed by years of accumulated pain. Oliver, you are a fool if you think you can save everyone. I have already made my decision. Leave me. Save yourself and the baby. That is what matters now. But Oliver, with his heart racing and the smoke making each breath a struggle, took another step toward her. I am not abandoning you, Da. I promised myself I would find a way to resolve this, and that is what I am going to do. No matter what you think you deserve, I will not let you die here. I will not let the fire take you. I have the baby now. It is your turn. He looked directly into her eyes, challenging her to let go of her self-destruction. Looking at the intensity in Oliver's eyes, Da seemed to hesitate for a brief second. But before she could respond, the flames rose even faster, and the heat became almost unbearable. Another beam fell from the ceiling, blocking the exit Oliver had intended to use. Now they were trapped. Everyone was now stuck inside the house. The sound was muffled by the smoke filling the room. He held the baby tighter, trying to protect him while looking around for a way out. Da, we have to find another exit. If we stay here, we are all going to die. His heart pounded in panic, and he knew time was running out. Da looked at the flames around them, her expression slowly shifting from resignation to something close to fear. Oliver, what do you want me to do? There is no way out of here. Oliver shook his head, determined. There has to be. We will get out. You, me, and the baby. I just need you to trust me. There is always a way out, even if we cannot see it now. But if you give up, if you surrender, it will be too late. His voice echoed through the burning room, and he knew he was speaking not only to Da, but also to himself. He had to believe there was a solution. The smoke was getting thicker, and Oliver could feel weakness taking over. He knew he could not afford to falter now. Please, Da, listen to me. We can still get out of here alive, but you need to help me find a way out. You do not deserve to die like this, nor does the baby. He coughed violently, the air almost impossible to breathe. Oliver held the baby with one hand and extended the other to Da. Come with me. I know the fire is everywhere, but we still have a chance. Let us get out of this house. Let us give this baby a chance to live. But you have to trust me. His gaze was steady, and for the first time, Da seemed to want to believe. She hesitated, looking at the flames licking the walls around them. Finally, with a heavy sigh, she took Oliver's hand. Da was trembling, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes and deep within her heart. With Da at his side, Oliver began desperately searching for an exit. The heat was almost unbearable, and each second felt like an eternity as they ran from one side to the other, avoiding burning pieces of wood falling from the ceiling. The smoke was blurring his vision, and the baby would not stop crying. Oliver felt despair tightening around his chest, but amid the smoke and suffocating heat, his eyes landed on a small opening in the corner of the wall, a window covered by debris and partially blocked by a fallen beam. He grabbed Da's arm firmly and pointed toward the unlikely escape. There, Da, that window. It is our only chance. If we can move that beam, we can get out before the fire consumes everything. You need to help me now. Da looked at the window, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. She nodded, wiping tears mixed with soot from her face, and rushed to help Oliver. He handed her the baby, protecting him with his coat, and with desperate effort began pushing the beam. Push with me, Da. Push with all the strength you have. We cannot give up now. I promised we would get out of here alive, and I am going to keep that promise. Da, with renewed determination, used all her strength, and together they managed to move the beam enough to clear the window. Oliver, breathing heavily, opened the way and pushed Da and the baby out before climbing through himself. Just seconds before the house collapsed completely under the flames that almost prevented him from saving everyone, and also Easley, whose time was nearly up. Right after that tragic moment, Oliver collapsed to his knees on the cold asphalt as they escaped the burning house. The fresh night air felt like a blessing after the suffocating heat and smoke, but he was still gasping, struggling to breathe. The smoke he had inhaled during those last moments had almost left him breathless. With the baby safely in his arms, he looked over at Da, who was also exhausted, her face covered in soot, and her eyes staring into the distance. The sound of police and fire truck sirens echoed in the street, adding to the tension that still lingered in the air. Oliver, watching the flames consume what remained of the house, knew the nightmare was not over yet. He looked down at the child in his arms, who had finally stopped crying. The little one seemed unaware of the chaos around him, his eyes half closed, still frightened by the noise and confusion. Oliver felt the weight of that moment. He had saved the baby, but everything around him seemed to be crumbling. I will not let this be the end for him. Not after everything we have gone through and what we still have to face ahead, he thought, determined to protect the baby even when the world around him seemed to be falling apart. Da remained silent, her body slumped in defeat. There was nothing more she could do, and Oliver knew the police were on their way. Da, it is over. There is nothing more to do. You need to surrender. This cycle of destruction cannot continue. No matter how much the pain has consumed you for so long, we cannot let it define our lives. Think about what you have done. Think about what is at stake. Oliver took a deep breath, trying to find some peace amid the chaos, but his words were filled with sadness. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a pain so deep it seemed impossible to erase. I do not know who I am anymore, Oliver. I spent so long being someone who should not exist that now there is nothing left of me, not even the baby. What do I have now?" She looked at the baby in Oliver's arms, but her gaze no longer held the intensity it once did. The desperation that had driven her seemed to have extinguished, and all that remained was the acceptance that the end was near. Oliver held the baby more tightly, feeling the weight of that life in his hands. "What remains, Days, is what you choose to do from here on. You can continue down the path of destruction, or you can somehow find a way to start over. It might be too late to change the past, but it is not too late to let the future be free from the same darkness. You still have a choice." His words were calm, but carried a silent plea. He did not want to see Days wither away any more than she already had, even with all the wrongs she had committed. At that moment, the sirens grew louder, and the police finally arrived. Cars with flashing lights stopped in front of the burning house, and officers quickly got out, assessing the situation. Oliver looked at Day one last time before standing up, still holding the baby firmly. "Do not run, Days. Please. It will only make things worse. You need to face what you did, but you can do it with dignity. Surrender now. I am asking, please. Do what is right. Life rewards those who do good and take responsibility for their actions." She stood motionless for a few seconds, watching the officers approach. There was a glimmer of resignation in her gaze, as if in that moment all her internal struggles, the hatred and the vengeance she had carried, had finally been exhausted. Day slowly raised her hands, looking at Oliver one last time. You always believed you could save everyone, did you not? I really wanted to believe I could be saved too, but some people are beyond redemption." Daisy's words were soft, almost whispered, echoing in the silence that followed. The officers reached her, handcuffing her hands firmly, but without brutality. "Days, it is not about redemption. It is about accepting the consequences and moving on. No matter how difficult that may seem, you can still change, Days. There is still time. Think about it." Oliver spoke as he watched her being taken by the police. This was the end of a tortuous journey for Days, but also the beginning of something new. She was placed in the police car, the sound of the doors closing resonating through the street. The baby, who had been crying before, was now quiet in Oliver's arms, as if sensing the immediate danger had passed. But the tension in the air had not yet completely dissipated, and Oliver knew the weight of what had happened would not vanish easily. "I did what I could. Now everything depends on you, Days. Everything depends on your choices from here on," he thought, watching the police car drive away. Oliver took a deep breath and looked up at the dark sky. The flames from the house still lit up the horizon behind him. He was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The past few hours had been a test of his strength and sanity. "I don't know how I'm still standing, but what matters, little one, is that you're safe and that you really are my son. The miracle is here. You're safe with your father, and that's what counts now," he said, his voice thick with emotion, tears streaming down his face. Still, Oliver knew there was another battle ahead. His thoughts went to Isley. From the moment everything began, her absence had been a constant presence in his mind, like a shadow following him. The thought grew in his mind with an increasing urgency. The feeling that time was running out gripped him. He started walking towards the car. "I need to go to the hospital. Let's go. We need to see your mother. I can't waste any more time. I need to be with her." At that moment, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He frowned, pulling out the device quickly. The sirens around him and the noise of the street seemed to fade when he saw the hospital's name on the screen. A chill ran down his spine, and he answered the call with trembling hands, his voice thick with apprehension. Something inside him already knew that what he was about to hear was not good news. On the other end of the line, a doctor's voice sounded serious, getting straight to the point. "Mr. Fuentes, we need you to come to the hospital immediately. Your wife, Aisley, is in critical condition. Her condition has worsened in the last few hours, and I'm afraid she doesn't have much time." The silence that followed felt unbearable. Oliver stood still, as if the world had stopped spinning for a moment. He felt the air leave his lungs, and words became difficult to form. Fear gripped him. He had been through so much that night, fought the impossible to save the baby, and even days. But now his wife was on the brink of death. "Aisley is dying. I'll be there as fast as I can. I'm on my way, bringing our son." Oliver's voice broke at the end, and he hung up the phone, still trying to process what he had just heard. He looked down at the baby, his eyes misty, feeling a tremendous pain in his chest. "I fought for you, my son, but now I might lose the person I love most in this world. So unexpectedly. I can't lose her. Not now. Not like this." Confusing thoughts filled his mind as he tried to find the strength to keep going. The image of Aisley in her final moments haunted him, and he knew he had to rush to be by her side. As he held the baby tighter, a wave of despair washed over him, but also a sense of responsibility. He had saved one life, but was on the verge of losing another. "I know you're just a child, and maybe don't understand this now, but what I did today was for you. But now I need to save Aisley. I need to save your mother and our family. I need to be with her. I can't let her leave alone." Oliver tried to hold back his tears, but they insisted on falling. The lights from the sirens still illuminated the street, and firefighters were now battling to control the flames. Oliver gave one last look at the scene, realizing how destroyed the world around him was. "I survived the fire, but I don't know if I'll survive what's to come." He carefully placed the baby in the back seat, closed the door gently, and got into the car. The hospital wasn't far, but at that moment, every mile felt like an insurmountable obstacle. In his car, Oliver drove at high speed through the deserted city streets, his heart pounding furiously in his chest. The silence inside the car was heavy, contrasting with the sound of the tires tearing through the wet asphalt. The baby, wrapped in his coat, breathed irregularly in the back seat. Each time Oliver glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw the small, fragile body and felt a growing terror grip his soul. "Please, God, give me strength. Don't let all this have been in vain. Not after all the hell I went through tonight. I need to get to the hospital. Aisley, the baby, my family, depends on me." The thought propelled him forward, but the fear was overwhelming. When he finally arrived at the hospital, Oliver nearly stumbled as he got out of the car, the exhaustion and physical fatigue taking over his body. He opened the back door with trembling hands and took the baby, who was now even more still than before. "Please, please, Kai, stay with me. We're almost there. Have strength, my son, for everything you've gone through and are going through so young. I believe in you and your strength," he murmured as he hurried toward the hospital entrance. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of responsibility was crushing his shoulders. The automatic doors opened with a soft noise, and Oliver entered the reception with a desperate look. "I need help, please." The baby, he was in the middle of a fire. "Please save my son. He's so young, and he's also my wife's only chance. He'll donate his marrow to save her. Don't let me lose my family," Oliver shouted to the medical team, who rushed toward him as soon as they saw the panic in his eyes and the child's fragile state. "We need an emergency team now. He's having breathing difficulties. We need to stabilize him immediately," shouted one of the nurses as she took the baby from Oliver's arms. Oliver stepped back, his heart shattered as he watched the medical team rush the baby toward the emergency area. His legs weakened, and he leaned against the wall, panting. He fought to keep his composure, but the image of the fragile, almost motionless baby haunted him. Oliver tried to convince himself that everything would be okay, but fear refused to let him rest. He thought he had done everything he could, and now it was out of his hands. As he watched the scene unfold before him, a doctor approached. "Mr. Fuentes, we understand the severity of the situation. We are stabilizing the baby and preparing him for testing and the marrow transplant, but he is very weak. The fire appears to have caused severe respiratory complications. We will do what we can, but we cannot guarantee anything at this time." The doctor's words felt like a stone pressing on Oliver's chest, intensifying his despair. "But he has to survive, doctor. He's just a child. He's strong. And he's also the only hope to save my wife. He needs to donate the marrow. Isley is dying. If something happens to him and her, I can't lose them both. You have to do something. You have to save the baby." Oliver's voice cracked as he tried to control his emotions. He knew he was on the verge of breaking down, but he needed to keep hope alive, to believe there was a chance, no matter how small. The doctor nodded, his face grave. "We are doing our best, Mr. Fuentes, but you need to understand that the baby is in critical condition. The fire caused severe damage, and his respiratory system is very fragile. We will stabilize him first before proceeding with any procedure. And as for your wife, she is also in a very delicate condition. We need to act fast, but time is against us." The doctor paused, as if the words were difficult to speak. Oliver felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Time was something he didn't have, something his wife and the baby didn't have. Why does everything have to depend on so little? What else can I do? How can I save Isley and the baby? Frustration and despair consumed him, but he knew his only choice was to wait, a wait that felt endless. Suddenly, the sound of alarms echoed down the corridor, and a medical team rushed toward the room where the baby was being treated. Oliver's heart raced, and he ran after the doctor, panic taking over his mind. The emergency room doors closed, leaving Oliver outside, trapped in his own anguish. A nurse approached him, her face urgent. But also empathetic, the nurse said, "Mr. Fuentes, the baby went into cardiac arrest. We are doing everything we can to stabilize him. Please trust the medical team. They're doing the best they can." The nurse's words were like daggers in Oliver's chest. He stood there, feeling helplessness invade every cell of his body. Cardiac arrest, my God. I can't lose this baby too. I can't lose the child God gave me, the child Isley gave me. Not after everything I've been through. Oliver closed his eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the tears threatening to fall. Please, he's just a baby. He can't. Not now. He needs to survive. He needs to live to save my wife, to have the life he deserves. I can't do this alone. I can't fight against everything alone. I need him to hold on. Oliver leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest, watching the doctors fight for the baby's life from the other side of the glass. Minutes passed, but they felt like hours to Oliver, who kept his eyes fixed on the medical team, waiting for some sign of improvement. He felt powerless, a feeling he hated more than anything else. He was used to solving things with his own hands, but now all he could do was wait and pray. Please, please. Mustn't let him die. Not after all this. I can't lose my family. Finally, the doctor returned, his expression graver than before. Oliver immediately knew something was wrong. The doctor sighed deeply, his forehead creased with worry. Mr. Fuentes, we tried to stabilize the baby, but the situation is critical. He's not responding as we've hoped. The smoke inhalation and damage from the fire has severely compromised his respiratory system. At this moment, we can't start the transplant process. He's fighting for his life, and we cannot guarantee he'll survive. Oliver felt the ground open beneath his feet. The doctor's words hit him like a punch to the stomach. Everything around him seemed to fade away, leaving only the distant sound of his heart pounding uncontrollably. No, this can't be happening. Not after everything. The baby, he has to survive. He has to live to save his mother and have a life filled with joy, with his family. His voice trembled, barely a whisper, as if he were begging the doctor to say everything would be all right. But reality was merciless. The doctor continued, his voice low and careful. Mr. Fuentes, we've done all we can so far, but the baby is entering a critical state. We need to focus on trying to keep him alive before thinking of anything else. Your wife's condition is also delicate, and without the transplant, we don't know how much time she has. Oliver was stunned, the doctor's words echoing in his mind. The baby was on the brink of death. Isley was dying. Everything was falling apart. Without saying a word, Oliver turned and walked away. He felt the weight of despair suffocating him, each step heavier than the last. He didn't know where to go or what to do. Everything seemed out of control, as if he were being dragged into an abyss from which he couldn't escape. I can't lose them both. I can't. What can I do now? What should I do now? He murmured to himself, the words coming out almost as a plea. He needed a miracle, but didn't know where to find it. Rain began to pour heavily outside the hospital. Oliver stepped out the main doors and felt the cold drops hit his face. Mixing with the tears he could no longer hold back. He didn't care about the rain or the cold. All he felt was unbearable pain, a crushing emptiness. Why is this happening? Why is everything going so wrong? If there is any higher power, God, please do something. Show me what to do. I'm begging you. He looked up at the dark sky, raindrops falling into his eyes, wandering aimlessly down the wet sidewalk. Oliver felt lost, as if the world were collapsing around him. I did everything I could. I fought. I brought the baby. I saved Daisy. And yet everything is going wrong. Isley is dying. Our tiny baby is dying. He ran his hands over his wet face, not knowing what else to do. The sound of rain was the only thing filling the night. I need a miracle, but where do I find one now? He stopped under the awning of a building, looking out at the city around him. The car lights passed by, reflected in the puddles. For everyone else, it was just another night. For Oliver, it was the night when everything he loved was about to be taken from him. I did everything I could. I swear I did. But it feels like the world is determined to make me lose you. How will I go on without you? He looked at the sky again, seeking answers in a place where he knew there would be none. Suddenly, his mind was overcome with a wave of anger mixed with despair. He punched the wall of the building beside him, feeling the pain radiate through his hand, but he didn't care. Why? I can't accept this. I can't lose my family like this, not after everything I've been through, after everything I've faced. He shouted, his voice muffled by the rain. The echo of his own pain mixed with the sound of the drops hitting the ground. Oliver fell to his knees on the sidewalk, his head down, his hands buried in the wet ground. Minutes passed like hours, Oliver lost in his own suffering. He felt the rain running down his body, but the cold outside was insignificant compared to the ice growing in his heart. I always believed that if I fought hard enough, things would work out. But now, it feels like I'm powerless. I don't know what else to do, he murmured to himself, his voice weak as he felt hope slipping away. As he knelt there on the street, the sound of a siren approached. Oliver slowly raised his head, watching an ambulance pass by quickly. All I can do now is wait. Wait for something, anything to happen, because the way things are, I don't know how to bear this pain anymore. He stood up slowly, his body weighed down by exhaustion and sadness, and began to walk aimlessly, wandering as if he had lost his grip on reality. The rain poured heavily over the city, drenching every corner, every street, as if the sky was crying along with Oliver. Every drop that hit his face mixed with his tears, which he could no longer hold back. Despair consumed his body, and he could barely think straight. His knees gave out, and he collapsed on the wet sidewalk, not caring who was passing by, not caring about the world around him. The only thing that mattered now was that he felt powerless. His heart beat in an erratic rhythm. The sound of the rain drowned his sobs, but not the chaotic thoughts in his mind. Why is everything falling apart like this? Why, after everything I've been through, am I on the verge of losing them both? I can't accept this. I can't. Oliver clenched his eyes shut, his face turned to the ground, his hands clutching the cold, muddy asphalt. The pain in his chest was unbearable, a pain that consumed him, making him question everything. He raised his face to the sky, the raindrops running down his skin, washing away the despair of his tears, but not the agony he felt. If there is any higher power, help me. My God, please hear me now. I have nothing left. I have no more strength. I don't know what to do. I just need a miracle. Save Isley. Save the baby. They don't deserve this. I'm begging you. Do something, anything. Only a miracle can save them, and only you can make that happen. His voice broke in the rain, a desperate plea thrown to the wind, not knowing if it would be heard. Morgan's words hit Oliver with the force of a miracle. He felt his legs almost give way from relief, as if the weight on his chest were finally starting to lift, even if only slowly. He looked up at the sky, feeling the rain still running down his face. But this time, the tears that mixed with the raindrops were of gratitude. Thank you, thank you. Deep in my heart and my faith, I knew they could fight. I never lost hope. Never. He murmured, his words coming out broken, but filled with emotion. Morgan stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on Oliver's shoulder. They still have a long road ahead, but you brought them here. Now we need to keep fighting, and that includes you too. They're going to need you by their side. Her words were a balm for Oliver's soul, and he nodded, feeling his determination reignite within him. I'll be there. I'll fight for them until the end. No matter what happens, I won't give up now. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you for giving me this hope. Oliver took a deep breath, filling himself with courage and strength. He knew the path was still uncertain, but now there was something to believe in. There was a chance to save his family, and that was all he needed. Oliver entered the hospital room with a heavy heart, as though each step he took sank him deeper into a swamp of uncertainty. The cold white light illuminated Easley's pale face as she lay motionless in the bed, surrounded by machines monitoring each breath, each fragile beat of her heart. Her expression was one of vulnerability he had never imagined seeing. The pain of seeing her like that cut through him like a knife. He approached the bed, his trembling hands touching hers, as though that physical connection could revive the bond he feared losing. "I'm here, Aisley. I brought the baby, and now they say there's a chance, but that chance is as fragile as you are." Now the doctor approached Oliver, his expression somber and serious. "Mr. Fuentes, we've evaluated the situation. The bone marrow transplant is ready to proceed, but the baby's condition is extremely delicate. The decision you need to make is not easy. If we proceed, there's a high risk for both your wife and the baby. Both are very weak, and any complications could be fatal for either one or even both. I need your authorization to move forward, but I need you to be aware of the risks." Oliver closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision fall on his shoulders like a crushing mountain. He was trapped between two lives, both dependent on a choice he knew he couldn't predict the outcome of. "I know the risks are great. I know the baby can barely breathe on his own, and I know Aisley is on the brink of death. But what can I do? I can't simply give up on one of them. They are everything to me. I can't lose either of them. After all we've been through, we will keep fighting. We are never truly alone." The doctor watched him closely, waiting for his response, but there was no pressure, only the harsh reality of the moment. Oliver, still holding Aisley's hand, leaned closer to her, as if his words might reach her in some distant place. "Aisley, I don't know if you can hear me now, but I'm here, and I need you to fight. I know you're strong. Our son needs you. I need you. Everything we've done has brought us here, and I can't make this decision without thinking of you. But if there's even the slightest chance to save you both, I'll take it. I'll fight for you, as I always have, as we always will, fight together." The silence in the room was almost unbearable. The sound of the heart monitors seemed to be the only thing alive there. The doctor, understanding Oliver's anguish, gave him a moment to process the situation. "Mr. Fuentes, I understand that this is an impossible decision, but we can't wait any longer. We need to know how to proceed." Oliver looked at the doctor, his eyes filled with pain and uncertainty. He knew this was a life or death choice, and there was no way to predict the outcome. Oliver straightened, squeezing Aisley's hand one last time before turning to the doctor. "I authorize the procedure. Do the transplant. If there's any chance of saving them both, I accept the risk, no matter how risky it is. I can't just stand here and watch them slip away. Aisley and the baby, they are my life, and I have to believe they can make it through this." The doctor nodded respectfully, but his expression still carried the weight of what was to come. He stepped back, leaving Oliver alone with Aisley once again. With a heavy heart, Oliver looked at his wife's peaceful but so fragile face, wondering how everything had reached this point. "I should have done more. I should have seen the signs, understood what was happening before. But now, all that remains is hope," he said. As the minutes passed, Oliver felt time slipping through his fingers like sand. Every second felt like an eternity, each beat of his heart a cruel reminder that he was at the mercy of fate. He looked at Aisley again, still silent, and couldn't help but imagine what she would say if she were conscious. "You would tell me to be strong. You have always been my rock, Aisley, and now I am trying to be strong for you, but I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can handle the possibility of losing you, of losing our little son," he said. Minutes later, the procedure began. The doctors worked in silent harmony, each movement precise, each action filled with urgency and care. Oliver watched through the procedure room window, feeling powerless. He wanted to be inside, holding Ainsley's hands, protecting the baby, but all he could do was wait. Anxiety consumed him as he paced back and forth in the corridor, trying not to succumb to despair. Please, God, let this work. They have already been through so much. They deserve a chance. Time dragged on, and with each second, Oliver felt his fear intensify. He could barely breathe, feeling the weight of his decision crushing him. What if I am wrong? What if I'm putting them in more danger with this choice? But what else could I do? Just stand by and wait for life to take them away. That was never an option. It never will be. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor exited the procedure room with a cautious expression on his face. Mr. Fuentes, the procedure has been completed, but both are still in critical condition. The next phase is the most delicate. Now we need to see how their bodies will respond to the transplant. They are fighting, but we cannot guarantee anything yet. The next few hours will be crucial. Oliver took a deep breath, feeling relief mixed with lingering anguish. He approached Ainsley's bed, still unconscious, and took her hand once more. I know you will get through this. You have always been stronger than I am. You have always taught me to fight, to never give up. And now, I need you to keep fighting. Ainsley, the baby needs you. I need you. The hours passed in a tense, silent atmosphere. Oliver remained by Ainsley's side, not leaving the room, afraid that every second away could be the last. He watched her every move, hoping for any sign, any hint that she was coming back. He still couldn't see the baby in the neonatal intensive care unit. Then, when he least expected it, he felt Ainsley's hand squeeze his gently. His heart raced, and he looked at his wife, whose face was starting to show signs of life. Ainsley, can you hear me? Can you hear my voice, my love? Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the intense light in the room. She looked confused at first, but gradually her eyes focused on Oliver, and she tried to speak, though her voice was weak and hoarse. Oliver, are you here? What is happening? Are you all right? She murmured, her breathing still heavy. Yes, my love, I am here. I never left your side. The baby is fine, and the transplant was performed. You are both fighting, and I know you will make it through. I thought I had lost you. I thought I would never see you open your eyes again. But you are here, and that is all that matters now. Oliver said, unable to hold back the tears that streamed down his face as he spoke. Ainsley closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath as if trying to gather her thoughts. When she opened them again, there was something more in her gaze, something that Oliver couldn't immediately identify. Oliver, I need to tell you something. There are things I never told you, things that maybe could have prevented all of this. I was pregnant. I wanted to surprise you, to tell you when you came back from your trip, but there was no time. I wanted to tell you in a special way. Ainsley took a deep breath as if seeking the courage to continue. I wanted it to be a perfect moment, just for us. But Days, my twin sister, she came back. I never told you about her because she was part of a past I tried to forget. She was troubled, and I thought we would never see her again. But she found out I was pregnant and started threatening me, saying she would take everything from me, including you. She said, Oliver, feeling the weight of Ainsley's words sinking into his mind like an unexpected blow. He could barely process what he was hearing. Tao knew about the pregnancy and she She threatened to take everything from you? Why didn't you tell me before? I could have helped. We could have faced this together, Oliver murmured, his voice trembling with confusion and pain intertwined. Isley closed her eyes for a moment, letting a tear roll down her face. I thought I could handle her on my own. I didn't want to involve you, didn't want you to carry the burden of my past. Days was always unstable, always full of resentment. I thought that if I didn't confront her directly, she would eventually give up and disappear again. But I didn't know she had taken the baby until you brought him home. And when you said you found him on the street, I panicked, as he was supposed to be sleeping in his crib. I had put him to sleep some time before, and I never thought Days would be able to enter our home and take him. I was terrified when I realized what she had done. Oliver held Isley's hand tightly, trying to absorb the gravity of the situation. She came back to destroy everything you had built, everything we had built, and I didn't know anything. I was blind while she was planning all this, but you were trying to protect me. I understand that now, Easy, but I wish you had trusted me from the start. Maybe somehow we could have prevented all of this, he said, taking a deep breath and trying to remain calm. Isley nodded, the pain and regret clear on her face. I know, Oliver, and I am so sorry. I should have told you. It was something silly. You were traveling. You would be gone for months. And I found out I was pregnant. I just wanted to surprise you. But when I started receiving the threats, the fear of losing you, the fear that Days would do something terrible held me back. I was so terrified that I ended up isolating myself, and now everything I feared almost happened. I just wanted you to know that the baby was our hope, our chance for a new beginning. Oliver felt a knot form in his throat. He leaned closer to Isley, gently stroking her face. Isley, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter what did or tried to do. What matters is that you two are here, and despite everything, we still have a chance. We still have our baby. We still have each other. I just need you to keep fighting. We still have so much to live for together. Isley's eyes filled with tears, but this time there was something more, a silent determination that Oliver recognized. I will keep fighting, Oliver. For you, for our baby, for everything we almost lost. I will not give up. I promise. We will make it through. Oliver smiled despite everything. That's all I needed to hear, because together we are stronger than anything that tries to tear us apart. We will get through this, and we will raise our child just as we always dreamed. He kissed Isley's forehead, feeling a renewed sense of hope and relief. After all they had faced, there was still a light ahead, and Oliver held on to it with all his strength. The battle was not yet won, but in that moment, in the silence of the hospital room, Oliver knew that regardless of the challenges ahead, he and Isley would fight together, and they would win. A few months had passed since that night in the hospital, the night Oliver felt everything would fall apart and that he would lose the two people he loved most. But miraculously, both Isley and the baby survived, and now life was slowly getting back on track. The house was bathed in the soft light of a quiet morning. The distant sound of birds echoed through the open window, and Oliver, sitting on the living room sofa, watched Isley rocking the baby in her arms. The little one whimpered softly, but soon calmed down, feeling secure in his mother's embrace. Oliver leaned back on the sofa, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He still remembered the fear, the long sleepless nights, the uncertainty that seemed endless. I never thought I would see this day, he said, Seeing you with our son in your arms, it's like a dream. After everything we have been through, I cannot believe we made it," he murmured, looking at the scene in front of him with gratitude in his heart. Easley looked at him with a soft smile, her eyes shining with a serenity that also seemed new. "Me too, Oliver. There were moments when I thought we wouldn't make it. Moments when I thought I would never be here with you, with our son. But you fought for us, and I don't know how I will ever thank you for that." Her voice was sweet, but carried the weight of the difficult memories that still lingered over them. Oliver stood up and walked over to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder as he looked at the baby. "There is no need to thank me, Easy. You and our son mean everything to me. I would do this 1,000 times, face anything to protect both of you. Just knowing you are here with me is worth more than any thank you. We overcame this together, and that's what matters." Isley took a deep breath, feeling the peace of the moment, but also aware that the traumas were still present. Sometimes I find myself reliving those days, reliving the fear, the pain, and I wonder if we are truly safe now. I know Days is in prison and that it's all over, but sometimes the memory of what happened still haunts me. I just want him to grow up in peace without carrying the weight of our past. She looked at the baby, who was now sleeping in her arms, and smiled sadly. Oliver sat beside her, gently taking Easley's hand. "I understand. I also have those moments when it feels like everything could fall apart at any instant. But then I look at you, at him, and I remember that what matters is the present. The future is something we will build together, step by step, leaving the past where it belongs. We have already been through the worst. Now it is time to live this new chapter, to enjoy our family." Easley nodded, moved by Oliver's words. "You have always been my strength, Oliver, even when I couldn't see a way out. You believed we could win, and now all of this feels distant, as if it were a nightmare we finally woke up from. But sometimes I wonder what lies ahead. How will we adapt to this new life? Will we really be able to leave it all behind?" Oliver smiled softly, brushing his fingers across her face. "We don't need to leave everything behind all at once. Overcoming what we lived through is a process. It will take time, and that's okay. The important thing is that we are in this together. I won't let you carry these traumas alone. And our son, he will grow up knowing he has parents who went through so much, but who love him more than anything in the world. That is what matters now." Easley smiled a genuine smile, but with a lightness Oliver hadn't seen in a long time. "You're right. We are going to build something new, something beautiful. We'll give him a life filled with love and hope, not fear and pain. I feel ready for this new stage. Even with the scars we carry, I know we can make this work." The baby began to stir in Easley's arms, and she rocked him gently, soothing him back to sleep. Oliver looked at the scene with a sense of fulfillment he had never imagined he would feel. He is a survivor, just like us. He went through so much, but now he's here, safe in your arms. It makes me realize just how strong we are together, Easley. Nothing can break us, not after what we faced. Easley leaned into Oliver, resting her head on his shoulder while still holding the baby. "I am grateful we made it this far, and I'm grateful you never gave up on us. Sometimes it feels like it was all a test to see if the love we have was strong enough. And now, I know that it is, that it always was." Oliver smiled, kissing the top of her head lovingly. "Our love has always been strong, Easley, but now it's unbreakable. No matter what happens, we'll face everything together. We'll build our life one day at a time without rushing, without fear. Our son will grow up surrounded by love, and that's what truly matters. The morning sun filtered through the window, filling the room with a soft, welcoming light. The house, once filled with tension and fear, now felt like a home again. Oliver looked around, feeling a deep peace, something he hadn't felt since before all the events that nearly tore his family apart. He knew challenges would still come, but with Aisley and their son by his side, nothing seemed impossible. Aisley, her eyes still closed, spoke softly. "I could never have imagined that we would be here like this. When I think of everything that happened, of how we almost lost everything, I feel even more grateful that we overcame it. I just want every day from now on to be a celebration of this new chance we have." Oliver squeezed her hand a little tighter. "And it will be. Every day will be a victory, Aisley. Every smile from our son, every peaceful night will be proof that we made the right choice, that we never gave up. We deserve this happiness, and we will protect it with all we have. This is the life I always wanted for us, and now we can finally live it." He looked at the baby, who slept peacefully, and felt his heart fill with joy. The house was silent, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with the love and connection that Oliver, Aisley, and the baby shared. Oliver knew there was still a long road ahead, that the ghosts of the past might appear from time to time. But he also knew that with Aisley by his side and their son in their arms, they would be able to face anything. Aisley opened her eyes and gave Oliver a kind and appreciative glance. "Oliver, you are loved. I adore our family and our life, and I have faith that we will be all right no matter what, because ultimately, we just have one another, and that is more than sufficient." Oliver grinned, love brimming from his heart. "Aisley, I also adore you, more than words can convey. Additionally, you and our son will always have my support. Together, the three of us are against the world." Oliver and Aisley eventually found the tranquility they had long sought on that sunny morning, surrounded by the warmth of their house and the gentle sound of the baby's breathing. After going through hell, they found themselves in a place where love was paramount. Oliver understood that thought to be the truly happy ending.